Hi, my name's Nathan Bailey. What's your name?
And my name is Tom Frier.
All right. Nice to meet you. I had a few questions for you.
Very good.
So I heard you worked in the Air Force.
Correct. Yes.
What was that like for you?
Uh, it was it was as I look back on 21 years in the Air Force, it was full of some great opportunities. I've lived in some wonderful places. The fact that not only was I a pilot and got an opportunity to do some interesting flying. The military is good about education. Got to go to graduate school, I'm a graduate of the Air Force Academy. Graduated in 1963, but contrary to graduates now that have a ton of student loans and all that, I had zero when I graduated, which was one of the advantages of doing that. So.
Well, cool. So when you were growing up, did anyone influence you to go into the army, into the Air Force, or why did you pick to go into the Air Force?
Well, it's been asked me before, and I'll give you a slightly different answer. When I was in high school, and I was born and raised in Northwest Wyoming up by Yellowstone Park, my folks had asked me, was I interested? In those days, it was even before there was the Air Force Academy. There was just West Point and Annapolis. And I didn't have told them no, I wasn't really interested. And so after graduating high school, I went to University of Wyoming 1 year at Laramie. Well, like Kansas State, Wyoming was a land grant school. In those days, you either took Army or Air Force, ROTC, and so I took Air Force. And that's kind of what sparked my interest. And then partway through that program, one of the instructors, I guess, at ROTC talked to me and said, "Well, maybe you ought to apply to go to the Air Force Academy." I got an appointment, and next thing I knew, I'm in Colorado Springs, and had to start my freshman year over again. They don't have redshirt program there, but and then was there from '59 to '63, and then for 21 years, I was in the Air Force. I retired as a lieutenant colonel.
So do you remember your first mission? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
My first mission, and when I was over in Southeast Asia. Good question. Well, I was based in Thailand, and I was flying the F-4 Phantom, and we had a variety of not just air to ground, but a lot of air to air missions. And it was actually an escort mission over Laos. The Air Force had some reconnaissance planes that would listen in on transmissions coming out of North Vietnam, but they were afraid that the MiG fighters in North Vietnam, because they were very successful. I mean, they were flying very slow, didn't have any armament or anything, and so they had we had two F-4s, I guess, per escort for doing that. So that was I did that for several times. I did a variety of missions though. Ended up a bunch of air to ground and even some night missions over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which that was flying around at night. That's with another airplane. You don't want to run into them, obviously. So that was kind of interesting.
Well, okay. So what did you think of the whole war, like the Vietnam War? Were you scared? Were you just what were your overall thoughts
Oh,
on that?
apprehension going in, but once I got involved, and of course in those days, and I know the Vietnam War is it's still controversial in this country, and the demonstrations were there. But I mean, I was very early in the war in 1966 when I was there, and of course I consider myself a patriot, and the political climate was they were talking about the domino effect, that if the communists took over South Vietnam, then it could be the Philippines and the rest of Southeast Asia. And I guess I, at that stage, subscribed to that theory too. So.
Did you ever take part in the XYZ affair or anything like that, or you just were basically for refueling? You didn't take part in like any action fighting through airplanes.
Oh, you mean like air to air
Yeah,
type?
air.
Yeah. No, I didn't see didn't have any MiGs. In fact, it's interesting. When I left in December '66, Operation Bolo was being planned out of our base, and in the middle, a month later, they shot down seven MiGs, but I didn't see any MiGs. Probably the scariest I came to. Of course, I saw anti-aircraft on some of my missions, especially at night. I mean, you'll see the tracers coming up. But I did see SAM missiles on a couple missions. I guess I haven't shared this thought before, but there was one time, and we were in the Hanoi Haiphong area, and we had just made our last pass and starting to exit, and I looked back over my shoulder, and they had launched a SAM at us, and I would not be sitting here right now if that missile would have been guiding, but it was not. But it passed underneath our airplane by a couple 100 foot and went out about a half-mile away and exploded. But the description of a SAM missile was it looked like a flying telephone pole because it was a very narrow, but the fire coming out of the bottom of it. But anyway, that's probably one of the scariest times I've had as I think back on it.
So when did you get to go home?
I got I'll back up for a second. If Air Force pilots flying in South Vietnam, it was a year's tour. But I flew in North Vietnam, and so as soon as we got 100 missions, we got to come home. Well, I started in June, and then in December is when I finished. So I was actually home for Christmas that year, December of 1966. So, long time ago.
So you're here at Boise State. What do you think about it so far?
I'm very impressed. I'm one of the rookies. This is the first time that have ever done it. I've heard a lot about it. My son actually went through Boise State back in 1987 when the program was over at KU, and he. In fact, I talked to him last night. He lives in Oklahoma City now, but he was felt very fortunate. He ran for state office and became Secretary of State. So he's got very, very fond memories. But so, like I say, I've known about it. This being the first year's advisor, probably won't be the last.
So do you have anything, something special that you've liked so far? Like, what's your favorite thing that's happened so far?
That I've seen. Of course, the food is great. Everybody says that. So, but well, the facilities. I mean, it's just. I think it's just awesome that K-State supports the program the way it is. But the fact that also this is the 80th year of Boise State, and to me that says so much in terms of the quality of the program, the people that have been through. And if you think back 80 years ago, we were still in the Great Depression. It was 1937, and why? And then I guess it started at Wichita then. But to me, it would those first people took risk, I guess, in terms of establishing it. And it seems like each year you probably keep getting better. Well, the technology that's now too, such as a recording like this.
So over the period of your life, would you change anything, or would you have changed anything?
No, I really wouldn't. I didn't get married till I was almost 28. My tour in Southeast Asia I was still single then, but let's see, yeah, it's 2017, and I've been married 49 years. So next year's the big 50. I've got a son who's happily married in Oklahoma City, and he's got there's 3 grandchildren there, and then my daughter is. She and her family live in the Kansas City area, so they're very close. And she's got 2 little boys too. So I've got 5 grandchildren, and that's when you get to be my age, it's having grandchildren and trying to keep up with them is great. So,
well, would you do you have any word of advice for boys who come to Boise State?
well, as we saw in the opening ceremony, and the speakers I thought said it so well. It's just to try to hit the ground running, take full advantage of it. When Friday comes, hope you go home exhausted, and then you can catch up on your sleep there. But I mean, there's the more I learn about it, there's just so much to do in the political offices and the structure. And course, being in the Air Force, like I say, I retired as a lieutenant colonel. Leadership was very important. I've been involved in the scout program. Leadership is very important then. Well, not hopefully, leadership is very important in the Boy State program too. I mean, that's you can kind of separate yourself from some of your peers really if you're a good leader, and good leaders, number one, I've heard this often, they don't think of themselves, they look out for the people that they're leading. It's very, very important, one of many lessons, I guess, in terms of leadership.
Well, so you said you were a veteran. You are a veteran. So on days like Veterans Day or Memorial Day, do you feel any um, just tell me what emotions are going through you on those days.
Well, again, I consider myself very patriotic. Of course, we just had Memorial Day. My son and his family were up from Oklahoma City, but I go out to the Manhattan Cemetery. They have a program put on by the American Legion, surprisingly enough, in the morning at our cemetery, and I've been going to that, I think, just about every year that I've been here, and actually my son and the whole family went this year, and it really made kind of an impression upon them. When it comes to Veterans Day, um, back in the early 90s, during the Desert Shield Desert Storm, the entire division out of Fort Riley was deployed for Desert Storm. And when they came back, Manhattan turned out, and that's when we had our very first Veterans Day program. And I've been involved in that planning program ever since. I was a treasurer of that organization for a number of years. So that's and this, of course, this community being right next to Fort Riley, it's kind of a special relationship between the community and Fort Riley.
Well, anything last you want to say before we?
Appreciate the opportunity just to keep talking here. So I guess, well, as I mentioned in one of my earlier interviews, somewhat of a bragging thing, I guess, but when I consider how fortunate my life has been, and one of them I'm reminded in my study at home, I have a picture in there. The day I was commissioned, shaking the hands of the president, and the president at the time was JFK. It was, and of course, I'm talking about June of '63, and it was November of '63 when he was killed. So, I mean, that really kind of got to me. So that's probably one of my pride and joys, I guess.
Well, I wanted to thank you for talking with me
Well,
and answering.
excellent questions, and I just appreciate the opportunity. So thanks so much, and thanks to the cameraman over here.